afternoon, good morning, whenever you're listening. Welcome to episode 3 of the Oyé World Pod with your host, Paul Duhaney, and my co-host, Spykatcha. How you doing, Spy?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this one because we've got a special guest on this time. We have Liverpool royalty, as far as I'm concerned, historian, general, good guy, and...
Liverpool Black History Tours.
So, Laurence, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well, Paul. Good to see you both. I haven't seen Spykatcha for a long time.
I know, it's been
really
a while.
Good to see you.
Well, this is these little get-togethers are, serve a lot of purposes, as well as getting some good material out there. We get to catch up with each other because all the people that we get on this show are friends of the show. So great to have you. So. As you know, we have themes for the show every month. Laurence has chosen his 5 best tracks, or 5 tracks that he couldn't live without. And then we're going to also talk to him about any hobbies that he might have that he wants to disclose, but we'll come to that in a bit. Also give you some more information about the festival moving forward and any gigs we have coming up later on in the show. But without further ado, let's move on. Laurence, first of all, before we go into your 5 tracks, tell me a little bit about your musical history, what you listen to, the range of music that you listen to. It'd be interesting to hear because we had some really good shouts from Duhaney that were quite surprising. So let's hear what kind of musical background that you have.
Yeah, man. Well, I have quite a wide and varied taste when it comes to music, but the music that I'm most fond of kind of comes from the rock blues genre.
Okay.
It's the music of the African diaspora, but it's been shaped and molded through the experiences of people of African descent outside of the continent.
Okay.
And it's not just music that's played by black people, but it's the music that's influenced people from lots of different backgrounds. So the first band that I really got into as a young kid, when I was about 11, 12, was The Doors.
Okay.
The Doors were like one of my favorite bands, and I wasn't aware of the links to the blues with The Doors until I started looking a bit deeper. But some of their music is probably the music has most shaped my musical tastes, and it was out of The Doors that I really experienced Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
And Jimi Hendrix led me on to Curtis Mayfield. And then I got into other bands that were kind of from that type of background. And it's really that music that has most influenced my musical taste today. I was also into like hip hop, but it's, I put down like my hip hop taste kind of ends about 1993, 94.
So you're old school hip hop?
Well, yeah, because I grew up in a very militantly black household.
Public Enemy.
So my mum wouldn't tolerate any of that foolishness.
Yeah,
It was like Public Enemy, the music that was associated with the struggle, Paris.
Paris, remember
X-Clan were probably my favourite, even more so than Public Enemy. So that's kind of what I grew up on. But I had that on both sides. And because of that, people used to think I had a really strange musical taste. Because the kids who I'd play football with in school, they used to give me stick because I listened to The Doors because they were into heavy metal. And then the kids who I'd see around the house, they used to dig like the hip hop side of things, but didn't understand why I liked Jimi Hendrix and rock. Do you know what I mean? So it was quite interesting for me.
Well, one of my observations out of that is like, Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, both really kind of seminal frontmen. Really, you could put them in like probably the top 10 of best frontmen ever. Really,
Yeah.
Did that have any link to it, or do you just think it was the music? Is that just a coincidence that you had 2 sort of enigmatic frontmen involved?
Not really. I think for me, the person that I'm most enamoured with The Doors was Ray Manzarek.
Yeah, Manzarek.
Like his organ playing was just it set them apart. I love Robbie Krieger's guitar playing as well, and Jim's. His voice was really good, but some of his poetry I didn't really dig. But it was the formula. It was like that blues format, that 12-bar blues, and instead of the bass player having that funky organ bass, that's what I really dug about the Doors. Hendrix, I mean, does music really go any further than him in terms of the quality and the way that he kind of molded lots of different musical genres? And for me, that's what's so great about music of the diaspora. It's that ability to kind of take your situation, and in the case of Jimi Hendrix, and kind of not follow any particular rules and just put it all together and see what you come up with. You know, that's so much like, you know, if you talk about the culture of enslaved people, for example, that's very much part of our resistance. It was the ability to kind of subvert. And I see that very much in Hendrix music, and probably no more, well, I won't mention what track I would really say embodies that, but...
Well, I think with Hendrix as well, a lot of people wasn't really having him at the beginning because it was so freestyle and like almost like stuff that people had never heard before. And it was almost seen as like a bit weird at first, but it was only when people got deep into it and they saw how, you know,
I would say it's still like that, particularly for the black community.
They don't get it.
I find that a lot of people in the black community are very orthodox. And anytime you do anything which is slightly avant-garde, it's like, nah, man, we're not having that. That's not part of the canon. And that's the thing that I really love about Hendrix and why I really think he embodies the music of the African diaspora, because it's that ability to kind of subvert the norms and come up with something which is greater than the sum of its parts. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do think that if you look at the age of people now, I think, you know, people who are like 40 and older probably don't have the same kind of hang-ups about their musical tastes as a younger generation. I don't know if it's a maturity thing and then almost like, you get to a certain age where you don't care what people think anymore. But I do think there's less, there's peer pressure for younger people, isn't there? It's almost like they want to listen to what their friends listen to so they can almost like belong in this kind of circle of, oh, you know, this person's good, everybody else thinks it's good, so I like them as well. I do think that people are becoming a little bit more eclectic as time's going on and almost like thinking, well, you know what, I just like music. I'm not really, you know, there's not that kind of, right, I listen to hip hop and that's it.
Yeah,
nothing else.
I agree as a DJ, I agree completely, because I play mostly music from the 90s era. But if I had to play what I really felt I wanted, I would play a bit of everything. And there's times when I've played absolutely everything. I played Fleetwood Mac, played Jimi Hendrix, Luther Vandross, across the board, Earth, Wind and Fire, a bit of everything. And I had to, and that was when that was a theatre type of crowd, but it worked. 10, 20 years ago, I couldn't be playing that. People were like, what are you playing? What's that?
You're almost like putting
you're supposed to be playing this.
Exactly.
You understand what I mean? And it's like, no.
I mean, I would suggest to you that the idea of black music and what black music is still very well defined. And I would suggest that for most people, Jimi Hendrix does not fit within that paradigm. Although he's undoubtedly a black man who's playing music, but we have this very specific idea of what black music sounds like. And that's the thing that I find that I really struggle with, especially when you understand that, you know,
the roots of it.
The roots of rock music is black music, isn't it? It's the blues, you know, if that's what you want to call it. And that's where I really struggle with this idea that if you've got like a pantheon of black artists, Hendrix might not necessarily be in that pantheon. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
They'll put him outside of that pantheon. And when you grew up playing on the Chitlin circuit, so that's all black clubs in the Deep South.
That's right.
And it's only when he kind of comes out of that and is appreciated by a white audience that he's considered to be doing something which is...
When he comes here,
Do you know what I'm saying? And that's something that I really struggle with.
And then you touched on Curtis Mayfield, you know, amazing artist as we all know. And what kind of led you into getting into that? Was that just, you know, did someone put you onto him or?
It's my mum again. So my mum's record collection. So, you know, and the fact that his music, I associate his music with the civil rights era much more than I associate Marvin Gaye's. I mean, even you know, in the early 60s when, you know, most Motown artists just singing about love and blah, 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 Curtis Mayfield is writing songs like People Get Ready. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm Your Pusher.
Do you know what I'm saying? You know, We're a Winner. You know, so these are the types of songs that I kind of grew up on. And that's the music that most resonates with me. Do you know what I mean? So I could put Curtis Mayfield on, and that would be enough. If I was on a desert island and I had the Impressions and Curtis Mayfield, because his music's so inspirational, it reminds me of being a child, you know.
I think Curtis is very underrated. I still think he doesn't really get, you know, people talk about Move On Up and that's it really.
That's
it. Just goes so much deeper than that.
Oh yeah.
I would argue that Curtis Mayfield may well be the most underrated songwriter in popular music history. Do you know what I mean? Because all the people who he influenced, come on, let's be honest, you know, without him, would we have Bob Marley? Without him, I don't think we'd have or many of Jimi Hendrix's like greater songs like Little Wing or Axis Bold as Love. It's just a copy in Curtis Mayfield's guitar playing technique.
That's true.
Do you know what I mean? And for me, the lyrics, when you add to the lyrics, like Choice of Colours or We're a Winner, you know, these songs that are so uplifting, to me, undoubtedly, he's the songsmith of the civil rights era. It's his music that I associate with civil rights, not Marvin Gaye's.
He scored so much music as well.
And the finest soundtrack in history, I would argue. Nothing beats Superfly as a soundtrack.
Superfly is the one,
Do you know what I mean? That is absolutely top drawer.
But you know, Snoop Dogg without Superfly.
There you go. And don't get me wrong, I love Black Caesar as a James Brown soundtrack, but nothing comes close to Superfly, does it? That's just next level.
Yeah.
And the consciousness of his lyrics, you know, like he was like really shocked by how well Superfly did, and he saw that what the music, the movie was kind of portraying, and he was like, he railed against that afterwards. But you know, for me, Curtis Mayfield, undoubtedly one of my top 5 artists of all time. Yeah,
I'm feeling you on that one. Okay, so let's move on to your 5 tracks. And as I said to our last guest, you know, there's no particular order in this, no rhyme or reason. You know, I know there's probably another 5 tracks, another 500 you could probably put in there, but let's start off with number 1 on this list. Who are you going with?
Okay, number 1, I will go with Skip James and Hard Time Killing 4 Blues.
Oh, okay, deep. So tell me your reasoning behind that.
It's just one of the finest blues songs I can think of. Bentonia blues, that really, I love, like, the music of the African diaspora is something that really resonates with me. And for me, I mean, although that song, you know, was written in the 20th century, that goes back to like the 18th century, doesn't it? And you can imagine enslaved people. Yeah. That is the sound of slavery as far as I'm concerned. And it's something that really resonates, you know, with looking at me from my own personal.
And as that again, was blues something that you had in your household?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was all the music that I would associate with early to mid 20th century, mainly American, but not only American music. That's kind of what I grew up listening to. And Skip James, I came to Skip James after listening to people like Muddy Waters and stuff. And obviously Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson's kind of who you probably are introduced first, but Skip's music, his voice, that haunting voice, and the tuning that he plays, Bentonia Blues, as it's called, from Bentonia, Mississippi, just so haunting. It is the sound of the cotton fields.
Well, we actually, our last guest, we were talking about, she actually mentioned country music as one of her things that she listened to in her household, and we were talking about the similarities between country music and blues and the storytelling element of that, and that always seems to kind of resonate with people, is the storytelling, and you're saying the same thing there about the blues, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, music has been segregated in the States, hasn't it? You know, so when people think of country music, they think of white folk, and when they think of blues or country blues, they think of black folk. Like you're saying, behind that is the need to tell these stories, or it's life, isn't it? It's really, it's a discussion about life and everyday life, and that's what I very much take from that traditional, American music, as you might call it.
Hard time on everywhere you go. Times it's harder than ever been before. And the people are different from door to door. Can't find no heaven, I don't care why.
Okay, should we move on to track number 2?
Yeah, okay, so we just had a long discussion about Jimi Hendrix, so I would probably have to say, in that very same mould as like talking about the music that has a story behind it, and I think Jimi Hendrix electrified that better than anybody, so I would have to say Machine Gun.
Okay.
And yeah, the version that he played at the Fillmore when he was playing with Band of Gypsies, so he had Buddy Miles on drums and Billy Cox on bass, which I just think, like I say, I mean, as far as electric music's concerned, does it really go any further than that?
And is there any kind of live performance that you ever saw of Hendrix that sticks in your mind? that you can recall?
Well, sadly, I was never there, but the two performances, obviously I would mention the Fillmore East concerts when he played with the Band of Gypsies, December 31st, 69 and the 1st of January 1970, but then also the Monterey performance, which is what I saw as a kid, and I was like, whoa, that was just incredible, do you know what I mean? And that's just, I've still got all three DVDs of the Monterey performances, and that's just like, you know, that's just incredible.
Seminal.
Yeah.
Legend.
That's when he lights his guitar on fire.
Yes, of course. And everybody wondered what was he doing, but there was a point behind everything, isn't it? Yeah. When it comes to Jimmy.
I mean, the thing with Jimmy is, like, he's honestly expressing himself, isn't he? When he does what he does, it's not really a performance because he feels genuinely like doing it. He's not just doing it because people expect him to do it.
No, it's
and that's
just
why that's kind of why he turned away from doing it, was because people wanted him to do it like every time he performed. But it's like, no,
like a performing.
Do you know what I mean?
Performing monkey.
Yeah, he was a true artist, you know, and that's what I very much get from his performances, is that sincerity and his, you know.
Shall we move on to track number 3?
No, I don't think we should. I think we should talk a bit more about Machine Gun. The reason why I say that is because it was such a political performance.
Well, tell me what's the meaning behind Machine Gun, the song?
Yeah. So Machine Gun, I mean, again, great art. It's open to interpretation, but you know, in that song, you hear the Vietnam War, don't you? Do you know what I mean? And you also hear the struggle of the Panthers. So what he says, the introduction to the performance that's on the Band of Gypsies album, he says, you know, this is dedicated to all the people fighting in Vietnam and all the people fighting in the streets in America. And that for me again is very powerful because, you know, I very much see myself as, you know, being very much inspired by what went on, you know, the Black Panthers and people like that. So that was something that I very much took from that performance as well. But I mean, to me, when I listen to that, you do hear the bombs and guns, and that's what Billy says at the end. That's what we don't want to hear. Well, Jimmy says that's what we don't want to hear, and then Billy says no bombs, no guns, and that was very much what I got from that. So it was a very anti-war statement by Jimi Hendrix at a time when, you know, a lot of musical performers were still afraid to kind of, you know, say anything that was negative about that war.
Very true.
And for people out there, just can you repeat what album they can get that track off?
Yeah, that's on Band of Gypsies. You can also hear a different version of it on Live at the Fillmore East, which was like a double album that was released many years later as a posthumous release. But Band of Gypsies, I mean, as far as live performances are concerned, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous, but for me, the best live album is undoubtedly the Band of Gypsies.
Brilliant. Are we allowed to move on now?
Yeah, I'm allowed to move on.
Right, okay. So we're going to move on to track number 3, and this is so far really interesting. Let's see what you come with next.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to go with another one of my musical heroes, Curtis Mayfield, and it's We're a Winner.
Okay.
Which is, I think he released that in 68. So again, right around the 67, 68. I don't think Martin had been assassinated by them, but that was one of the songs it's a really upbeat song. It's dead funky. It's like really funky. And he's talking about black people, you know, we're a winner, you know, we can succeed, you know, rise up kind of thing. And, you know, if you know Curtis Mayfield and his work with the Impressions, it's very soulful, you know. And I get a real, if I'm driving, I like to listen to that car when I'm driving. I like to listen to that song when I'm in the car because it always makes me feel good and, you know, feel positive.
It's quite apparent that all your track choices so far are centered around people that, you know, are activists really in their own way. Has that shaped the way you were, or you just like that anyway, and that's almost just like the soundtrack of your life?
That's what it is. It's my mum and my nan. it's them and what I would hear, the conversations that I would hear in the house, and that's the music that was behind those conversations. That was very much kind of like you said, the soundtrack to my childhood. You know, that's what I was listening to because my parents had it on, my nan had it on, or my mum had it on. You know, so, and you know, there's people like Paul Robeson and these types of figures who, you know, who were more than just artists. These aren't just people who are playing music because it pays the bills. They were really trying to promote a positive image and to make political change through their artistic activism. So yeah, so that's why so many of my favorite artists I associate with activism as well as just great music.
Okay, and in terms of your contemporaries, you know, your friends at school and stuff, how did they view you listening to these types of music? Or did you keep it to yourself? You know, we were talking to Gunan before and she was like, oh, you know, I used to listen to heavy metal, but I didn't want to tell anyone. I just kept it to myself.
I was always trying to convert people.
Was it? Yeah,
oh yeah, I was like, have you listened to Break On Free by The Doors, man, or The Changeling, or, you know, that was like kind of like, I always loved to share my music. You know, that's what I mean. Okay, I grew up in the 80s. But one of the things, you know, if you live in a time of mass consumerism, one of the ways that you can be a little bit different is by what you listen to musically. So I wasn't listening to I wasn't promoting what was on the radio. I was promoting things that I did, you know, that deep in the crate, digging in the crates.
And that's difficult to do in those days because, as I mentioned on numerous occasions, you know, we had Top of the Pops, we had BBC Radio 1. And that was it. And
that's what was so good about it, because people were like, what? No, I've never even heard of them. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, no, you've got to listen to this. And it was all bootleg tapes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And, you know, in those days, if you were into hip-hop, you didn't hear any hip-hop on the radio. No. Then Westwood comes along, and that was the only way you could get it, especially if you were from a working-class background, you didn't have access to
reggae. It was Rodigan, Tony Williams, who else? No one else really that I can think of. You had to really kind of search. In fact, in terms of when I was talking about Radio 1 and the BBC, on Top of the Pops, you also had John Peel, the Old Grey Whistle Test. That's where you had to go to kind of find the little gems, you know, that other people might look at and think, that's a bit weird.
And that's why when they brought out some DVDs for the Old Grey Whistle Test, oh man, that was just amazing when they did that. Like,
mate, that was almost like, you know, you watch Later with Jules Holland now. That was its predecessor, wasn't
Absolutely.
it? Like back in the day.
Bob Harris.
Bob Harris.
I remember it in the early 80s, but I was only a kid then, do you know what I mean? And obviously, you only had one telly in the house, so if no one wanted to watch, you had to go off because my nan was running things.
Yeah.
But that was how I kind of got access to that other music, you know? And I remember when I bought those DVDs and had the Curtis Mayfield performance, they're just treasures, aren't they?
Unbelievable.
You know, because this before, again, we didn't have a video when Old Grey Whistle Test was on, so you know, if no one was taping it, that was it was gone forever. And so when that came out, that was and
I also remember the Bob Marley Concrete Jungle
and Slave Driver.
Unbelievable. Big up Old Grey Whistle Test, and if anybody probably hasn't heard of it because of our age, we're showing our age, just try and check out some of the old shows of the Old Grey Whistle Test. You'll see some unbelievable gems on there from people you wouldn't believe performed on there, you know, A-listers, legends. So please check that out. Thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
I don't mind leaving here to show the world we have no fear, because we're a winner. And everybody knows it too. We just keep on pushing, like your leaders tell you to. At last that blessed day has come, and I don't care where you come from. We just gonna move on up. Moving on up. Lord have mercy, we're moving on up. Moving on up. Woo, we just keep on.
Okay, so where we're at, so we're on chat number 4 now, are we? Okay, just hit me with this next one.
Well, see, you just maybe mentioned one, and I know it's a bit cliche talking about Bob.
Never.
I know, and do you know what? And that's exactly how I feel. Do you know what I mean? Because again, he brought that music to the world. Really, don't get me wrong. There were people who were obviously playing that music long before him, but it's really for me, Bob, and that song "Slave Driver" off "Catch a Fire," which kind of really got me into looking at reggae, and as the same way I looked at like people like Curtis, you know, or Jimmy, or J.B. Lenore, or those types of people who were kind of politicizing their musical genre.
Yeah.
So yeah, Slave Driver by the Wailers.
Yeah, well, it's funny you talk about that, about Bob being overexposed. Spino actually having a conversation about a brilliant documentary we watched on BBC 4, which about when Bob came to the UK.
Bob Marley in Britain, that's right.
Yeah, which was an amazing documentary. And then we actually played Slave Driver on the show.
That's right.
That same edition. But, you know, I never get bored of talking about Bob Marley, you know.
Especially that album.
Yeah, and also, you know, that famous Rainbow performance that my mum and dad actually went to, in 1977, I think, at the Rainbow.
That's right. Famous performance.
Finsbury Park. And, you know, whenever I see that, I just get goose pimples, man. And the fact that we actually had Marcia Griffiths, who's one of the I3s, play at Africa Oyé.
That's right.
Singing Three Little Birds. I'll never forget that. Goose pimples and in Sefton Park, you know. So, yeah, never get bored of talking about Bob Marley.
Yeah. I mean, there's too many tracks as well, isn't it? Because now you made me think about Trench Town Rock and how much I love that. The way it just hit, you know, the first lyric as well.
Yeah.
Just love that song. But again, you know, because he politicised his musical genre, which is something that is so important for me. You know, my music, I get bored of listening to frothy music. I'm always looking for something in the lyrics. Do you know what I mean? And that's why, like, my hip-hop, my taste in hip-hop is very much those political artists. So you mentioned Public Enemy, and I mentioned X Clan and Paris, and, you know, even Intelligent Hoodlum, who later on changed the
Tragedy.
But that was really, like, I struggled as a teenager to listen to music if it didn't have that conscious message.
I was going to say that. So what about stuff like love songs? You must have a favourite love song out there, or
but it's probably something by Curtis Mayfield. If you really made me think about it, or, you know, I love Minnie Riperton. Do you know what I mean? You know, I love Le Fleur, or, you know, or Black Gold of the Sun. These are the kind of songs that I love. Like, you know, I love heavy guitars. Do you know what I mean? As well. So, but yeah, I do. I mean, again, for me, it's that political message, and even the songs that are love songs.
They've either got a political message, or the person that's singing them usually sings about political message. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Or I struggle.
Yeah. It's all good. Yeah. That's what we're here to find out, man. Okay, so how do you follow Bob? What's track number 5 then?
I was saying, I started off talking about the Doors because these were the first band that I got into that were a bit more eclectic. I say the Changeling off LA Woman. That's just I mean, again, they did so many great blues songs, but that one, it's so funky. Do you know what I mean? It's just. Again, it's Manzarek and it's
that eerie organ that, like, you just hear that influence in most of the songs that I like by them. It is because of that organ, so, I have to say. But, you know, it is complemented by, you know, Jim's, like, enigmatic, you know, performances and somewhat craziness in a lot of ways. But, you know,
yeah, he was very nihilistic. Do you know what I mean? And that kind of grates against what I say about what I really like about, you know, about music. But, like, his voice, I think he had a really soulful, bluesy voice, and that's why I love so many of the songs that are rooted in that blues. I mean, let's be honest, they are a great blue-eyed soul band as well, because you think of Touch Me, you know, or Love Me Two Times. You could, you know, they're very, like, brassy and sound, you know, and soul.
Even
sound
the end of Break On Through, you know, the way that sort of comes out with very soulful, very bluesy. Do you know what I mean? All the way through. And
I think they were very aware of that within their sound. But their best songs for me, you know, I've got to mention things like When the Music's Over Again, because what got me into them was I watched Live at the Hollywood Bowl, and still remember watching it in the summer of 1988, early morning, Saturday morning. Someone had lent me the video and said, "You've got to watch this," and I watched that, and it's that organ as a start, and then he goes into When the Music's Over, and that's what hooked me on them. And then I found, like, the Changing's on LA Woman, so that's the last of the albums, but that's just like it's just such a funky blues song.
It's mad. That's about the same time that I got into the Doors. I was working for a a company that exports stickers of pop stars, you know, like Rolling Stone stickers and stuff like that. Like, so we had this warehouse, and then we used to take these stickers up to Soho and all these places, and the Doors and Jim Morrison was always one of our big sellers. And I used to think, I don't know anything about this band, so every one that was selling well, I would find out more about the band, and then sort of got into them, and I was just like hooked, man. I was just like, wow, why haven't I heard this music before? You know, I come from a mixed race family, so we did have as much white music as black music in our household. So I was quite averse to both, but never came across the Doors until like late 80s.
See, and it's so funny that you say that, because I kind of railed against that idea of black and white music. I really liked the fact that my black friends thought I was weird because I was listening to this music that was considered to be white. I was like, no, because it's not white.
It's just
music. It might be white people. Exactly, it's just music. Yeah. It might be white people singing it, but when you think about the musical origins, you know, it's very much rooted in so-called black culture. Yeah. And I like the people who kind of muddied those waters, you know, and did it in a really original way. Don't get me wrong, I love a lot of what the Rolling Stones did, but the Doors took it somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I really loved. And then on the opposite side, I really loved Love, because they kind of took a folky type of side of music that you'd associate with white people, and they grounded it like they were they were a mixed race group. Again, this idea of race where music's concerned, I struggle with it. You know, that were playing that type of music and did it in a very cool avant-garde way, adding brass, but playing it in like a Spanish style. Do you know what I mean? Not like a jazz or a soul kind of style. And that's something else that I really like.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We were talking about this the other day, that we really need to get out of this pigeonholing people into, you know, even musicians. You know, there's young musicians out there that might like rock music or might like guitar music, but won't necessarily get into it because, one, there's no access for them, or two, you know, they're not seen as being part of that genre. So they almost like kind of like come out of it and then do something which they are pigeonholed. Hip hop and grime. It seems to be the order of the day for everybody, and I think we really need to get around that.
Massively so.
And realise that, you know, black people can play classical music, they can play rock music, they can play any type of music, you know.
But and this is something that I only associate with people within the diaspora, because you've got no problem. People in Africa have no problem playing classical music because they know they don't question their blackness. But in the diaspora, people think, well, if I don't do that, I'm not being black. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you're in Africa and you're growing up in an all-black society, you can do whatever you want, because no one associates that with you being authentically black. And that's one of the things that I think cripples the culture. And that's why I come back to Jimmy, because Jimmy had to deal with that. Black music would not play Jimi Hendrix at all. And I would still say they don't now. Did you hear him on Radio 6?
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? So I would suggest that there's still people who kind of pigeonhole themselves, and I would say that it extends much further than music, and I think it's really crippling for black people, especially black working class people who have limited access because of resource. So we very much kind of suggest that it's only black if we're doing things that have been considered to be black, and I think that even extends as far, not as much as it used to, certainly not when I was growing up, to doing well in school. Do you know what I mean? A lot of black kids think you're not being black if you do well in school. You know, and we've got to really challenge that kind of, some of these types of ideas. There's a really good book, which is, you know, it's almost 30 years old now. It's written by a guy who you've probably heard of called Paul Gilroy. Wrote a book called The Black Atlantic in 1993. The book was published. But he kind of highlights the fact that these ideas of authenticity or cultural authenticity are really crippling, and usually they cripple the people who are most disadvantaged within society, because they limit them to only going down certain routes, because they're the routes that are considered to be the things that they do. So for a lot of black kids, again, from my generation, it was like sports. You know, if you didn't make it in sports, then you weren't going to make it, or performance.
That's right.
So you know, you've got to be a singer or a dancer. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't make it, then that's it. You haven't made it. But there's such they're areas that are so difficult to succeed in. You know, and even within, the further you get within, you know, so if you're a good footballer, the further down that pipeline you get, it's a funnel, isn't it? more and more people have to get chopped away in order to make it to the Premier League or whatever. Same with singing and dancing, you know. It's a limiting path. Whereas education opens you up to a lot more opportunities because it's a lot more, the skills are more transferable. Do you know what I mean? You can be a great footballer but not good enough to play in the Premiership. And that means that those skills aren't really transferable. You might be able to become a trainer but you know, if you've got a maths degree, you know, there's a lot of different areas you can get into. But because of the way the culture has kind of been shaped, because we've had limited options in those areas, we don't see them as traditional routes. So if you go down one of these non-traditional routes, I remember being called, you know, if you're doing well at school, or you know, you're acting white. Do you know what I mean? You know, or you read books. What? You know, or for me, you play Dungeons and Dragons. These are the types of silly things you'd have to deal with. But because I was very comfortable in myself, because I knew where I was coming from with my family, they couldn't really challenge that, because I was, you know, well as reading.
But that's not the norm, though. You know, like,
no, it's not the norm.
You know, 9 out of 10 would completely go the other way and say, "Oh, everyone sees that as weird. I better conform with what everyone else is doing." So
exactly.
More power to you on that one. But what we need to do is change the narrative, don't we? And we
Absolutely.
need to, you know, people like ourselves. I mean, we've been talking about it already, about trying to get together some sort of cultural hub that basically gives everyone a chance to access any type of music. And also not just on the performance side, because we talk about this all the time, you know, everybody wants to be a star in front of the mic, but there's so much money that you could be making on the production side of stuff. Why don't young black people look at that as a way of accessing
songwriting?
Yeah, but not even that. Anything around production,
similar.
You know, stage managing, lighting, all this stuff is good paid work all the year round.
That's true.
But it's never highlighted as a career. It's almost like, yeah, you could be a rapper, but if you're not going to be a rapper, then there's not really much down for you. And that's not that's no way near. Exactly. I know plenty of companies that will quite happily take on, you know, young people, not just black kids, but underprivileged kids from the area.
There's good songwriters as well, for example. Look at Marsha. Look what Marsha's done from Liverpool. She wrote for Michael Jackson. The kids of this generation wouldn't have a clue what Marsha Ambrosius is.
From Floetry, right?
From Floetry, that's right.
I mean, that's for me is a key point, is that we don't think of ourselves as Berry Gordy's. We only see ourselves as Michael Jackson's or Marvin Gaye's.
That's right.
Do you know what I'm saying? And let's be honest. You know, Berry's still there, isn't he? You know, so that kind of tells you something about the longevity associated with that. We get kind of caught up in the fame and don't forget about the other side of, you know. And I think that's something that we've really got to address. You know, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's because, you know, you can only be what you can see in many cases. But we do have the Berry Gordies. We do have these people, you know, the great songwriting trios.
Got loads of them.
I do think things are definitely... I've been in Liverpool 22 years now, and it's changed like astronomically in that time. In terms of, you know, access and opportunity, but nowhere near as much as it could have been. But what I do see now is where people just wouldn't recognise that this was an issue before, it's actually being recognised. Before it was, you'd say something to people, it'd fall on, whatever it was, it'd fall on deaf ears, or
that's right.
You're just moaning. Now it's sort of like, actually, no, you're right, and actually we are going to listen and we are going to try and make a change. So we're at that stage now. The next stage is to make that change.
What would you say has brought that about, though?
I think definitely, you know, all the stuff that happened in America, the George Floyd stuff, definitely made people almost like, I think so many people were just, we'd seen it all before, but there was a lot of people that had never seen anything like that before. That's right. Which was quite shocking to me that they'd never seen it. But you know how it is, like, if you're not exposed to something, some people will turn a blind eye to it and just carry on with their normal lives. But that was something that nobody could hide from. So the shock value in that, I'd seen people that, you know, over the years that had never really taken much notice of these things, sort of said, no, this just isn't right. And then started to look at other things that have been happening and almost like educating themselves. And then, so you've got that, but then you've also got, you know, even people that did want to resist making a change had no choice but to make a change because, you know, certain things were implemented.
Which is what a lot of the media is doing now. You see it in the media now in front of you. As soon as you put on the TV, you see the difference already. Yeah.
So,
you know.
But a lot of it is, I look at it and go, oh, too little, too late, or...
Are you just doing it to fill the narrative?
It's just so obvious,
yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can't have it both ways. I'd rather, you know, even if it's done in a corny or condescending or, you know, being forced to do it, it's happening, isn't it?
It's happening.
And it's better than it not happening. But yeah, I am aware of, you know, there's certain things that I look at and I think, you know, that's a bit of...
I've got a couple of points to make in relation to that. First of all, it's shocking that it takes the horror of someone to be executed on screen to kind of make to make people realise that there's a necessity to change. And then on top of that, I worry about whether it's all about the optics. So people realise this doesn't look good, so they will make optical changes, you know. And then even on top of that, you've got the idea of, does that mean that they're really going to relinquish control, or they're just going to give a little bit more space to do a little bit more?
It's just space.
Well, that's my great worry, and that's why I think we've got to continue to push. You know, as Curtis said, you've got to keep on pushing. You know, did you see in the news yesterday? The Metropolitan Police are now having a discussion whether or not they're going to acknowledge that they're institutionally racist.
Yes.
You know, it's those types of things, isn't it? There's no way they would have made that kind of announcements. It's something that they've pushed against for so long.
Yeah.
And yet now they're discussing whether or not they're going to make that announcement. But again, as you say, people like you and I have always known that. You know, but we're considered to have a chip on our shoulder, or, you know, don't be daft, you know. The police are upstanding members of society. And again, in this country, what really highlighted that was the murder of the girl by the policeman. You know, so when black people are being murdered, it doesn't seem to really register. But then when it was a woman who could be murdered in such a callous way, people just started to realize, wow, yeah, the police aren't necessarily... They're there to protect and serve, to use a colloquialism from our American cousins. You know, there is police who will use their position to abuse that position, and we've known that for generations. Certainly in this city, you know, it's 40 years since the 1981 riot, isn't it? And you know, we've been very aware of kind of not seeing the police as being, you know, our friends and our protectors, as people who come and, you know, are brutalisers or oppressors. So that's something that I hope, you know, will change, but I'm very sceptical. I worry with change around this issue. It tends to wax and wane, doesn't it? You know, I remember wearing the Africa pendants
in 93, 94, 95, 96, and then they disappeared.
Exactly. and so I worry, you know.
I think that, you know, one way that it can change or help to make a positive change is if there are more people in prominent positions that can, you know, that are of colour, that can almost like lead, you know, what's the word, organically. But, you know, if they're doing it themselves, if black people are doing it themselves, then you don't have to rely on other people to be doing it as well. You can almost create your own narrative. So I think that's my concern, because I think it's about not necessarily what leaders do or people in positions of power, but organisationally, community-based organisations who will push for change.
That's where it starts.
And be consistent. That's my great concern, is that they do put one or two people and say, we'll trust you to go off and make change. And, you know, as an individual, it's very difficult. You become tired, disillusioned, etc. You just enjoy getting your wages. You know, whereas if a community is doing it and they're progressively doing it because they establish their own institutions and organisations, then I think we're more likely to see change.
Very true.
But I always worry when it's like the TV doing it. Do you know what I mean? Or, oh yeah, we'll put someone on. You know, we'll have a broadcaster who's black. Do you know what I mean?
Which they're doing more of now. Newsreaders and everything.
Weather people, you know, popping up everywhere. And yeah, it's a good thing, but I don't want it to be
saturated.
An act of tokenism, and I don't want it to be oversaturation. You know, I watched, I say this to my, we did it the other day, we were watching like the adverts during the programme, which you hardly do. And I just said to my family, just watch how many black people are in these adverts. And like literally, and then what they do is mostly have mixed race families, where it's a black man and a white woman, and then mixed race kids.
Still usually a food advert as well.
but like every single advert, and I was like, well, that isn't really kind of symptomatic of the country. Not everybody is a mixed race family. So, you know, it's, for me, it's where are you getting your information from? Because if you're still having an all-white advertising company making an advert, then surely you're still not getting a correct representation of the way it should really be. So I think it comes back to who are the people that are making the decisions, you know, and if it's still, you know, not a mixed board, whether it be interviewing people, selecting applications for jobs, you're still going to get these inconsistencies, aren't you? So I think that really needs to be looked at.
And the other thing is that can only affect certain areas as well. And what I mean by that is, there's so much in this society where you've got to have a qualification in order to access particular jobs, and yet we know that the educational institutions in this country fail black people in a number of different ways. Yeah. So again, that comes back to that issue of you can only be what you can see. You know, if you look at, I'm a historian, but if my faculty at the University of Liverpool, there's literally no black faculty whatsoever. There's no black faculty. In certain areas within this country, there's still massive leaps to be made.
Just the ACS, isn't it? That's all there is.
That's all you've got. I'm talking about employed workers. I'm talking about, you know, I'm doing my PhD there, and there's literally no black faculty. There's no black lecturers in the history department. And that's a major issue, not just in this city, across history departments, across the country.
The UK,
The Royal Historical Society produced a report in 2019 lambasting the situation in terms of, you know, history faculties in top academic institutions in this country for that exact reason, because there's no black staff.
So we're trying to right the wrongs of the world, which is going to be practically impossible. But you know, these are our opinions, and these are, you know, you don't have to take them on board. But I would just suggest to kind of listen to what we're saying and do some research, and you'll see that, you know, what we're saying is kind of true, and that we are moving forward and we are seeing positivity, but, you know, there's still a long, long way to go is what we're trying to say, right?
I mean, and, you know, again, I think it says a lot about our society where we think it's stranger to see a black doctor than to see a black performing artist or a black footballer. You know, let's be honest. How can it be that I know more black Premiership footballers as an individual than I know black doctors? Surely that is a crazy anomaly. You know, how many footballers do we need in the society, but how many doctors do we need? Doctors, obviously, you know, in terms of the service that they provide for society, they provide they're key providers of a service. But yeah, I know more black footballers than I know black doctors. I consider that to be a great.
I think that's the same for any system as well. Even the judicial system is the same.
Yeah, of course.
Can't think of any famous attorneys or.
That's a really interesting one, the judicial one. We went to they were trying to get more young people to be magistrates, or more black people actually. And when I heard some of the figures that were coming out around how many magistrates there were, it was almost like, so it makes sense that more young black people get sent to jail, you know, in proportion to the white counterparts. If all the magistrates are white, then obviously it's only natural that's going to happen. It goes back to the thing that I'm saying before. You need to have a mix. We're not just talking about we're talking about age. We're talking about gender. Everything. You know, that needs to be represented in everything we do, and that's the only way you're going to get you know, fairness, a fair system, is when everything's set up in a fair way. You know?
Yeah. So there needs, you know, the systems of society, the things that, you know, create people who can contribute to society, need to be dismantled and reassembled to allow black people to be able to move within those spaces. That's currently not the case. A lot of people just say, well, we live in a society where everyone's got the right to get an education, blah, 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 but they don't think about the everyday lives of these individuals and where they come from within communities. And then people will say, well, you know, the working class, and, you know, the great argument about, you know, the poor white working class have the same issues. They do. That's absolutely the case, but they don't have to deal with race as well. Do you know what I mean? They don't have to, they can aspire. You know, you wouldn't know a working class person was working class if they changed their accent or if they, you know, put on a suit on. Do you know what I mean? And so these are things that we, you know, that people don't want to highlight or address as part of the problem, but they are undoubtedly part of the problem. And, you know, this might be a reason why I think we need to start addressing some of the issues around this intergenerational disadvantage that's shaped a lot of the culture within the society, particularly in a society like ours. We were talking about monarchy earlier on, where we still, the class system is so rooted, isn't it? It's such a part of the history of this society and how it functions. And then you just add race on top of that and it becomes an even more of an issue.
Yeah.
Well, we could actually talk about this for hours, actually, and we're probably going to have to get you on again and chat more about... I wanted to dig a bit more deeper into Liverpool's music history and Liverpool's black music history, so we'll probably do that, get you on another podcast and love to talk further about that, but we're running out of time today. So yeah, that's about it for this month's edition of the Oyé World Pod. I'd like to thank my co-host Spy.
Thank you, Laurence.
And Laurence Westgaph, thank you so much. It's been really informative, and we'll see you next month. Thank you very much.